With less than 3 weeks to go before Election Day, WLTX is on your side, making sure you have all of the information you need in order to be an informed voter. Whether you're going to the polls on November 3rd, voting absentee in person, or absentee by mail, we know you have questions. And so today we're taking those questions to the State Elections Commission.
Well, 6 years ago, I rang the bell on my final chemotherapy treatment, and I wore the boot somewhere now, and I felt like it was significant that I get out here and vote today because it has a special meaning to me.
Our ancestors were killed just to vote. So, to show respect to them and to myself as a citizen of the United States, I think it's very important to vote.
It is very important because, again, the future of our nation is at stake. And and also the fact that voting is our right as Americans to do this, to participate in the process of making decision who is going to be our next leader.
Joining me now from the State Elections Commission, Chris Whitmire. You're the Director of Public Relations here. You're the guy that we email when our viewers email us and we need an answer. Chris, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Darcy.
All right, so the first question, Chris, we're going to jump right into it, comes from a viewer who wants to know.
Since mail-in ballots are probably going to be a lot more used this year, considering coronavirus, how long it's going to take for them to count all the votes, since it's going to be a longer process this year?
It's a good question. It could take a little longer. Well, it's going to take longer, but we've done some things to help ourselves be able to count those ballots in a reasonable amount of time. So the General Assembly gave us a little more time. We can begin that process a little earlier now. We used to have to wait until Monday to do one step and then Tuesday the next step. Now we can start on Sunday, and we got a few more hours on Election Day to begin. So we get a little more time. We also have provided additional scanners out to the counties, letter openers, mail processing equipment, and counties have been preparing. So we know the volume. We have record-breaking absentee by mail volume. So counties are making provisions, bringing in extra staff. We've provided counties with some funding to be able to add staff to the absentee process as well to sort of address that volume coming in. Now, with all that said, there's a few X factors in that. One is that at this point, we don't know exactly how many absentee by mail ballots we'll eventually have. We know it's going to be over 500,000. It could be 600,000, it could be more. Now, so that's one X factor. How many will we eventually get? And the other is that, it'll be more extreme in some counties than others. So some may have one level, but another county it's more extreme. They're going to have more issues and it's going to take them longer. Now, with all that said, it's possible that some counties could not be finished on Election Day and Election Night, could have to go into the next day. I don't envision anything that's going to last for days and weeks because after Election Day, counties will be able to focus all their resources on opening all those absentee by mail envelopes and getting all those ballots counted. So the goal is to get everything done on Election Night. If that doesn't happen, it could go into the next day in some places, but I don't envision any sort of long-term, we're waiting days and to get results.
I think that's going to put a lot of people's minds at ease. Our goal is to get as many questions answered in the next half hour as possible. Here's another question from a viewer.
I just want to make sure that all the same polling locations are going to be open and available that we're used to, and that everyone has an opportunity to get out there and vote.
So, and we all remember the June primaries when there was a lot of polling place moves going on throughout the state, some consolidations happening. We're not at the same level as we were in June as far as the amount of that happening, not nearly the number of consolidations, just a few around the state, but there are some polling place moves. Some people will be voting at the place where they voted in June. Some people will be voting at a different place. Some people will be going back to their old location. So there's right now about 100 locations like that throughout the state. We've got 2,300 polling places throughout the state. So a small percentage, but if your polling place was moved and sometimes that happens, so if your polling place was moved more than 60 days before the election, you would get a card in the mail, a new voter registration card that says, here's where you vote. If a move occurred after then, we'll send you a special postcard that says, hey, you have an emergency polling place move. It's moved close to the election. Here's where you're voting for this election only. And so you'll be notified by mail if your polling place moves. But if you don't get that, and my message to everyone, regardless of whether you think you know where you're going to vote or not, is to go to scvotes.gov, click Find My Polling Place, and that has the up-to-the-minute information on where your polling place is. So you could do that now, but I'd also encourage you, if you're going to vote at the polls on election day, do it before you go to the polls. Anything can happen on the night before the election, day before the election, that could cause a move. So that's just good advice and to every voter before election day. Check that as late as possible.
Chris, thank you. Coming up after the break, there have been so many questions rolling into our information center about absentee ballots. We're going to get those questions answered. You're watching Friends at 5 on WLTX. More than 400,000 South Carolinians have applied for their absentee ballot. We've been getting lots of questions in from our viewers. Chris, thank you so much for answering these questions for us. We're going to jump right into the next question from a viewer.
The most commonly asked questions that people have, they want to know whether or not they can bring their absentee ballots that are filled out here.
No, you cannot do that. So when you're voting absentee by mail, you have to return that ballot to your voter registration office or an extension office. Many counties have opened extension offices this year, more than ever before, more than 60 additional locations throughout the state for this election. So you have to take that absentee ballot to one of those offices. You cannot take it to your polling place on election day. If you try to do that, the poll managers are going to say that has to go to the voter registration office, and it's got to be there by 7 p.m. tonight. So you cannot return your absentee ballot to your polling place.
Our viewers want to know, what does voter suppression look like?
Well, I think that probably can take many different forms. Generally speaking, it is some act that is intended to dissuade somebody from voting, whether it's putting up barriers, creating confusion about an election. You know, one of the things that we worry about is all the information that's out there about elections, right? WLTX does a good job. scvotes.gov, we get out good information about elections. And so, but the wide world of the internet, there's a lot out there. And so, you know, you can have people who just make mistakes about information, and they think they're doing a good thing and spreading misinformation. But then you could also have an unscrupulous person who puts out some bad information like, hey, you can return your absentee ballot to your polling place. And then voters think that they can do that, and you know, with the goal of this nefarious person to create confusion and cause people's votes not to count. But I think that can take a lot of different forms. I would say make sure you are trusting good information, scvotes.gov, trusted source. And that if you see something like that, say something. You can call us at the State Election Commission and we'll look into it. Make sure you get good information and do what we can to fight fire with fire and take that bad information down.
All right, let's get back to these voter questions. This viewer says, I think I already voted, but not really sure, and I'm confused by all the information now.
So every voter has 3 options to vote. So one way is absentee by mail. You request your ballot by returning an application. Your ballot is mailed to you. So that's one way. You'll actually have a ballot that comes in the mail. You'll vote that, put it in the envelope, sign it, get it witnessed, send it back. And you can go to scvotes.gov if you're worried about, did my ballot make it back? You can check the date your ballot was issued, the date it was returned. And if you're really concerned about it, you can return it in person to the voter registration office too. So that's how you know you voted by mail. In person, in-person absentee is very much like voting on election day. You mark your ballot on a ballot marking device, put it in the scanner, you're done. You've put your ballot in a ballot box. And then election day, the same thing. So unless you've filled out a ballot and returned it to the voter registration office or put it in the ballot box there at the voter registration office, you haven't voted yet.
Last question before we go to this next commercial break. This viewer wants to know what is meant by in-person voting.
So in-person voting is really, right now, it's 2 things. One, it's in-person absentee voting, and that's where you go to your voter registration office or one of these extension offices. You show your ID, you sign the application there, you get a ballot, you mark it on the ballot marking device, you put it in the scanner, you're done. So that's in-person voting. And then on election day, the process is really the same, except you're going to your polling place to do it, which is somewhere near your house or your neighborhood, and you're doing that process there. And we're taking all the CDC recommendations for polling place safety. So we're taking all those measures to make polling places as safe as possible.
Chris, thank you. Coming up after this next break, you've been calling and sending emails about whether or not your employer is required to give you time off on Election Day. We're going to get that question answered for you after this short break. Well, the questions are coming in quickly, and we're going to try to get them all answered for you before this next half hour is over. Chris Whitmire, thank you again for sticking with us. News 19 is thrilled to be able to bring you the voter questions. You guys are the experts, and so this is a question we get almost every election year. This viewer wants to know, do employers have to give you time off to vote?
So an employer certainly could give you time off to vote, but there's no law that requires employers to give you time off to vote. That's certainly a good thing if your employer does that. But the good thing about this year is we have multiple options. So even if you can't get to the polls between 7 and 7 on Election Day, there's in-person absentee voting, there's absentee by mail, and every county voter registration office is going to be open from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday, October 31st. So even if you can't get to your voter registration office during the week.
What's the training like for your poll workers?
So poll worker training generally lasts about 3 hours for a regular poll manager. It covers a lot, and we ask poll managers to do a lot, and we can't have elections without poll managers. So we thank everybody who has volunteered to do that. And yeah, you do get paid a little bit, but they're basically volunteers, because people do this to really serve their community and their state and their country.
All right, here's our next question, Chris. This viewer wants to know, if I still haven't received my absentee ballot in the mail, can I go and vote absentee in person?
Yes. So here's what I say about that. If it hasn't been enough time for you to have received your ballot in the mail, again, go to scvotes.gov, see when your ballot was issued. If it's give it a few days to get there. So I'd ask voters to be patient about receiving their absentee ballot by mail. But regardless, you can still go vote absentee in person. It does take a little longer because they have to cancel that request. It's a little different process for you. And so I wouldn't encourage everybody to just go vote absentee in person who's requested it by mail, because that's going to slow things down. But if you need to do that, you certainly can do that.
Here's another question. Can I vote at any polling place in my county?
No, you can't. You need to go to the polling place that's assigned to your precinct. So now if in absentee, many counties have many in-person absentee locations. There you can go to any of those locations. But on Election Day, you have to go to your polling place, and the best way to find that out, again, scvotes.gov. I'm going to say it over and over, but scvotes.gov, click Find My Polling Place.
And for anybody who doesn't remember scvotes.gov, they can always go to WLTX.com. Yeah. Here's the next question, Chris. Where is the safest place to drop our absentee ballots?
I vote absentee by mail. I drop mine in the mailbox, and I actually drop mine in the mailbox down the street here. And I always do that. The Postal Service is great. They're committed to moving election mail through the process safely and securely and efficiently, and they've shown that over the years. But there's also that feeling of, hey, if you take it yourself and you hand it across the table to that election official and they put it in the ballot box, you know it got there. Because as great as the Postal Service is, you are putting your ballot into someone else's hands, into this organization's hand, to ensure it gets there. So if you want to be absolutely certain, take it yourself. And you can do that up until 7 p.m. on Election Day. You can even have somebody else take it for you, but you have to complete a form to do that. It comes with every ballot. It's called the Authorized Returnee Form. Complete that, and you can send somebody else with your ballot.
Perfect. Coming up after this short break, we've got a question from a viewer. Her daughter lives in Lexington County, Chris, and she's already received her ballot. She lives in Richland County, and she hasn't gotten hers yet. We're going to answer that question for you on what happens when you haven't received it and why a relative in a different county may have gotten theirs already. Stay with us. You're watching Friends at 5 on WLTX. News 19 on your side, making sure you have all of your questions answered before November 3rd. We came straight to the experts at the Election Commission. Chris Whitmire, thank you for spending the last half hour with us.
You're welcome.
All right, so here's a question. I think it's interesting. We've got viewers in 11 counties across the Midlands, and this one comes in from a mom. She wants to know, how long should it take to receive a ballot? My daughter lives in Lexington County. She got hers in less than 2 weeks. I live in Richland County and applied for mine on August 8th. and I still don't have it.
Yeah, so the basic answer on that is that absentee ballots are mailed out from each county as they have ballots available. So that date and time can vary by county. It also plays into when you applied and everything too. So sounds like in that situation they applied long enough ago to where they should be receiving their ballot on the first mail out. So when's the first mail out? Well, that varies by county. Some of them went out 2 weeks or more ago. Voters in different counties, it's going to vary. It could vary up to 2 weeks on when their ballot was sent out and when they receive it.
This viewer wants to know, how can I find out who all of the candidates are that I have to vote for on Election Day?
Go to scvotes.gov and click Get My Sample Ballot, and that'll give you a sample ballot that shows all of the offices, all of the candidates on the ballot. And I encourage everybody to do that because there are down ballot races that you might not be aware of. We all know who's running for president, who's running for U.S. Senate, but those down ballot races, the last thing you want to do is get in the polling place, get in the voting booth, and you're seeing these names for the first time and you don't know what to do.
Viewers ask us about taking their absentee ballot to satellite locations. Can you do that?
Yes, you can take your absentee by mail ballot to the voter registration office or one of the satellite offices, or extension offices as we call them. You just cannot take it to your polling place. And those extension offices vary in dates and times. So the fail-safe thing is that the voter registration office, of course, is open on Election Day, and that's going to be open to 7 p.m. on election night, and so it has to be there by then. But during the times the extension offices are open, yes, you can take it there.
Let me ask it in an even more simple way. If I show up on Election Day at my polling place with my absentee ballot in hand, can you just take it off of my hands and count it as my vote?
No, the poll manager will not take that from you. They'll tell you you need to take that to the voter registration office, and you better hurry up because you got to get there by 7 p.m.
What's been the biggest challenge for you all over the last, I'd say 3, maybe 6 months as you prepare for this?
Well, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected everyone in all sorts of ways, and elections are certainly no difference. And you know, the biggest thing is that the whole dynamic of the election has changed. We're going to have more than 1 million people vote before Election Day. You know, the record, it's about 500,000 set in 2016. We're going to more than double that. And so with so many people voting before Election Day, it sort of extends Election Day, right? It's almost like every day is Election Day, the types of questions we get. And so that's a challenge. Recruiting new poll managers has been a challenge that I think we've done a good job in solving. Finding polling places in a pandemic, you know, places that don't want to expose their facility to the pandemic. So that's been a challenge, and counties have worked hard to solve that. But the level of absentee, in particularly the number of absentee by mail ballots, which takes so much more work to get out and then to process on the back end.
Chris Whitmire with the State Elections Commission. Chris, thank you for spending the last half an hour with us.
You're welcome. Great questions.
All right. You heard him. He said it. Great questions, viewers. Keep those questions coming in, and of course, WLTX will take those questions to the experts and get them answered for you. Thanks for joining us.